name's Derek, I'm 26, and back in March of 2023, I was 3 weeks into a solo backpacking trip through Portugal, staying in a hostel just outside Lisbon called Riverside Bunks. I'd booked it because it was cheap, 11 euros a night, and it had good reviews for being quiet. I was in a 6-bed mixed dorm, bottom bunk, right by the window. The trip up to that point had been about as uneventful as travel gets. I did laundry at a place down the street. I got lost twice looking for a grocery store. I spent one whole afternoon just charging my phone in the common room and reading. Nothing happened. That's kind of the point of telling you this part. Nothing happened for 4 straight days. On the 5th night, a bed opened up above mine. The guy who'd been in it checked out that morning, and the front desk told me it'd stay empty since it was low season. I remember being glad about that, less noise, more room for my bag. Around 1 a.m, I woke up to the frame creaking above me like someone shifting their weight on the mattress. I figured a new guest checked in late. It happens all the time in hostels. People show up on red-eye flights at weird hours. I didn't even sit up. I just told myself, new guest, and went back to sleep. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time it was the same, a slow creak around 1. Sometimes what sounded like someone turning over. The metal frame ticking under the weight. I started listening for footsteps in the morning. Someone climbing down, using the shared bathroom, grabbing a bag. There weren't any. The bunk above me looked untouched every single morning. Sheet still tucked in the way housekeeping left it. No dent in the pillow. I told myself I was imagining the sound that hostel buildings settle at night, pipes contract, whatever. I wanted a boring explanation, and I took the first one that was offered. On night 7, I decided to actually check. I waited until I heard the creak start, and instead of lying there, I reached up and knocked on the underside of the mattress above me. The creaking stopped instantly, mid-motion, like something froze. Not like someone startled awake and went still. This was faster than that, unnaturally immediate. My mouth went dry and my hands were cold, even though the room wasn't. I lay there for a long time, not moving, listening to nothing. The next morning, I went straight to the front desk and asked, as calmly as I could, who was staying in the top bunk above bed 3. The guy working the desk pulled up the booking system, turned the screen around so I could see it myself, and the bed had shown as unbooked and unoccupied every night since the previous guest checked out. No one had been assigned to it. I asked if maybe someone snuck in without checking in properly, and he said the dorm door locks with a key card, so that shouldn't be possible. But he'd have maintenance take a look at the frame that day, just in case it was some kind of structural issue. That afternoon, 2 maintenance guys pulled the mattress off the frame to inspect it, and one of them noticed the wall panel behind the headboard wasn't flush. There was about an inch of gap where it should have been sealed. When they pried it back, there was a crawl space behind it, maybe 3 feet deep, running along that whole side of the building for old plumbing access. And there was a sleeping bag back there. Balled up fabric, a half-empty water bottle, and a phone charger still plugged into an outlet just inside the gap. Hostel security called the police, and I stood in the hallway with 2 other backpackers who'd come out of their rooms to see what the commotion was. About 20 minutes later, one of the maintenance guys, checking a second access panel down at the end of the corridor, came face to face with a man crouched inside it, and the guy bolted out into the hallway, trying to run for the stairs. He didn't make it past the second officer, who tackled him against the wall right in front of us. He was maybe in his 30s, filthy, and he was screaming something in Portuguese I didn't understand as they cuffed him and hauled him out through the lobby. The front desk guy told me later, once things calmed down, that they thought he'd been living in the wall spaces of that hostel for months, moving between rooms through the crawl space at night and slipping back before morning. I checked out that same day. I still sleep with my back to the wall now, even at home. I'm Priya, I'm 29, and this happened in October of 2022 at a hostel in Ljubljana, Slovenia, during a 2-week trip through the Balkans I took by myself, after a work contract ended. The hostel was an old converted townhouse, narrow hallways, creaky wooden stairs, the kind of place with a lot of character. When I checked in, the woman at the desk told me room 4 was closed for renovation and to ignore the taped-off door on the second floor. I didn't think anything of it. Old buildings need work all the time. I got put in room 2, a 4-bed dorm, and spent my first 2 days doing completely normal tourist things. A walking tour, a lot of coffee, one very long nap because of jet lag. On my 3rd night, the hostel overbooked. I know because the same desk clerk apologized to me directly and said they needed to move one person from my dorm into a private room to make space. And since I'd been quiet and easy, they offered to upgrade me for free. The private room was room 4. She said the renovation had just wrapped up that week, and it was actually the first night anyone would be staying in it. I remember thinking that was lucky. A free upgrade, and I didn't ask any follow-up questions about what kind of renovation it had needed. The room itself was fine. New paint, new floorboards, near the door that hadn't been sanded down all the way yet. I fell asleep around midnight and woke up a little after 2 to a sound like knuckles on wood, 3 knocks from somewhere down the hallway. I told myself it was another guest locked out, fumbling for their key, and that it wasn't my problem to solve at 2 a.m. I put a pillow over my ear and went back to sleep. The knocking came back the next night, except this time it moved. 3 knocks on a door, a pause, then 3 knocks on the next door down, closer to mine, then the next, like something was working its way down the corridor, one room at a time. I lay completely still and counted the doors between it and me. By the time it reached the room next to mine, my heart was going hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. Then it stopped, right outside my own door, and I heard the handle turn. Just the handle. No knocking first this time. It didn't open, I'd locked it, but I watched it turn slowly in the dark and then click back into place. In the morning, I told the desk clerk everything, and she went pale in a way that told me this wasn't the reaction of someone hearing a funny story. She said room 4 used to be locked permanently for almost 2 years after a previous manager reported the same thing. Doors being tried, one after another late at night, always stopping at that room. She said they'd only just reopened it because a contractor had gone through and resealed every door frame on that floor, and she genuinely thought that had fixed whatever the issue was. That night I asked to switch rooms, but the hostel was fully booked, and there was nowhere else to put me, so I did something I'm still a little proud of. I told the night manager, a guy named Al-Jaj, what had happened, and he agreed to sit in the stairwell at the end of my hallway with me instead of leaving me up there alone. Around 1:40, we both heard it. 3 knocks, 4 doors down. We didn't wait this time. We walked toward it together, him holding a flashlight, and we watched the door handles turn one after another as we approached, each one testing and failing, moving closer to us instead of away. When it reached the door directly across from where we were standing, the handle turned and that door actually opened. Since that particular room was unoccupied and unlocked for cleaning, Aljaz swung the flashlight into the doorway and we both saw a shape, low and fast, cross the room and go straight for the open window. I got one real look at it, pale, thin, moving on all fours, faster than a person should be able to move, and then it was gone over the sill before either of us could reach it. Aljaz leaned out the window after it with the flashlight, and there was nothing below. No rooftop, no ledge, just a 2-story drop onto a stone courtyard. He called the police that night, and they searched the courtyard and the surrounding street and found nothing. No body, no blood, nothing. I checked out the next morning and took the train to Zagreb early, 3 days ahead of schedule. I never did find out what it was, but I know what I saw go out that window, and I know it shouldn't have been able to survive the fall it took. My name is Sam, I'm 31, and in June of 2021 I checked into a small hostel in Reykjavik called North Light Hostel for a 5-night stay before renting a car to drive the coast. It was a small place, maybe 20 beds total, and they still used a physical guest log at the front desk alongside the computer system, an actual paper book where you signed your name and dates on arrival. It felt charming at the time. I signed in, got my key, and spent the first 2 days doing exactly what you'd expect. Walking around downtown, eating an overpriced hot dog, sitting in a geothermal pool for way too long, and getting a mild headache from the heat. On my 3rd morning, I was at the front desk asking about bus schedules, and while the clerk was flipping through the guest log to find a printed timetable tucked inside it, I noticed my own name on a page from 4 days earlier. Same handwriting style as mine, same spelling of my full first and last name, dated a full 4 days before I'd actually arrived in the country. I pointed it out to the clerk, mostly as a joke, and said, "Someone must have the same name as me." She looked at it for a second and said that entry had my exact passport number written next to it too, which guests wrote down themselves at check-in as a formality. I hadn't told anyone my passport number except when I checked in myself. I told myself there had to be a boring explanation, a clerical error, someone transposing numbers, a coincidence in a system that clearly wasn't very secure. I didn't want to spiral over a logbook entry. I went about my day, took a day trip out to see a waterfall, came back exhausted, and slept fine that night. The next afternoon, I asked the front desk if I could see the security camera footage from the lobby for that earlier date, mostly just to put my own curiosity to rest. The manager, a guy named Bjarni, was surprisingly willing to help and pulled it up on his laptop behind the desk. We watched grainy footage from 4 days before my arrival, time-stamped, of someone checking in at the front desk. Same height as me, same jacket I actually own and had packed for this trip. Same way of shifting weight from one foot to the other while waiting, which is a habit I've had since I was a teenager. The face on the footage was angled down toward the desk the entire time, like whoever it was knew exactly where the camera was and avoided it on purpose. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept the desk lamp on in my room and just lay there with my phone, not really doing anything on it, just needing a light. Around midnight, I heard the door handle rattle, the kind of small test the lock rattle you'd do, checking if a door was actually locked, not knocking and not trying to force it. I sat up and asked who was there. No answer. I got up, looked through the peephole, and the hallway was empty. I told myself it was another guest confused about which room was theirs, and I almost managed to convince myself of that until I heard the same rattle at my window 15 minutes later. My room was on the ground floor with a small window facing a side alley, and I watched the handle on the inside latch actually move, being tested from outside, in an alley that shouldn't have had room for a person to comfortably stand, given how narrow it was. I called the front desk from the room phone, and Bjarni came down himself with a flashlight. We went outside together to check the alley, and as we came around the corner of the building, we both saw someone standing directly under my window, facing away from us, wearing my jacket. Bjarni shouted, and the person turned halfway toward us, just long enough for me to see my own face looking back at me in the dark, before they took off running down the alley toward the street. Bjarni chased a few steps and then stopped, and neither of us went further. We called the police, who searched the area and found nothing, no one matching that description anywhere nearby. Bjarni let me switch to a different room for my last 2 nights, and he didn't charge me for it. I still have the photo I took of that guest log page on my phone, my own name, my own passport number, 4 days before I ever arrived. I've never been able to explain it, and I've stopped trying to.